Love and light, love and light, soul family, man. I just wanted to tap in with y'all one time for the one time, see how y'all doing today. You know what I'm saying? Especially with all this crazy ish that's going on within the world nowadays, man. Hey, I pray that everybody is being safe. I pray that everybody is praying, you know what I'm saying? And sharing that positivity and that love and light, giving those kind gestures as much as you possibly can. But man, I just wanted to tap in, and share a little something with y'all one time for the one time. Something that I've been doing as I've been progressing throughout my journey and stuff like that. Whenever it comes to me interacting with folks and meeting new people and having conversations and things of that nature, I tend to introduce myself nowadays as my first and last name, whereas back in the day when I used to be a kid coming up, or a teenager or whatever, I used to introduce myself with my street name or my nickname. And man, as I began to progress throughout my journey, whether it's a professional setting or speaking to females or just interacting with different guys and stuff like that, being out in the streets or in public and stuff, I introduce myself as my first and my last name, and I do that with confidence, and I say it with authority, and the reason why I'm saying this is simply because the fact of the matter is as a kid growing up, I always felt some type of way about my name. Not like, I was ashamed of the name that I, had, but I just felt as if, it didn't fit me and the person that I was pertaining to my personality. So, I would always introduce myself when I was a kid as, the nickname that my family used to call me by. And then as I grew a little bit older, throughout school, as far as middle school, junior high, high school, I would switch back and forth in between, my first name one year. The next year I would go by my middle name, and vice versa as the years progressed. But by the time I got to college, I just stuck to, my first name and stuff like that. But with that being said, as I've gotten to the point of where I am now within my healing journey, man, I completely and wholeheartedly embrace the name that I possess, that I have, my God-given name, the name that God has, blessed me with, and like I said, I introduce myself by my first and last name, well, last name if it's warranted, but more than anything, by my first name. And I say that with confidence and authority, simply because the fact of the matter is, I'm proud to be named the name that I have. In all honesty, I am grateful, and I wouldn't change that for any other name on this earth. In all honesty, by no means necessary would I trade the name that I have for any other name out there, in no way, shape, or form. And I'm saying this because a lot of people tend to whenever they interact with people, no matter the settings, especially when it comes to being out in the streets, they introduce themselves as their street name or a nickname, a name that, somebody else gave them, or, their childhood name that they family gave them, their parents gave them. And it's like, all right, well, does that really resonate with you? Does that really reflect who you truly are? And my take on it, in all honesty, whether, individuals love presenting themselves with the name that they present themselves with, my take on it is man, me going by those nicknames or street names that I used to go by, that was me, attempting to be someone that I wasn't, hiding behind a facade, portraying myself to be someone that I truly was not, as if I was going through an identity crisis. And now that I truly do know who I am, and I value the person that I am and who I'm growing to be, man, you can't get me to introduce myself as nothing outside of my first and last name. Simple as that. Because I am the one and only. the one and only. And I can guarantee you that. Simple as that. So, man, with that being said, just something, to think about. But also, when it comes to this portion right here is for, the younger generations that are growing up and getting into adulthood and stuff like that, having children and all of the above. Be mindful of the names that you choose to give your children, because they have to wear these names for the rest of their lives, and a lot of these names have meanings behind them, and they play a role whenever it comes to your life path, your destiny, and all of the above. So you have to be a little more mindful when it comes to the names that you choose to give these children, because, man, it can honestly benefit them or hinder them in some way, shape, or form. It all is connected. In all honesty, it is all connected. So do what you gonna do. I'm just saying, be a little more cautious. Take heed, have some meaning behind the names that you are choosing to give your children, because at some point in time, if they become consciously aware and begin to looking up the meaning of their name and stuff like that, they will find exactly what it is that their name means. And hopefully you have enough common sense to give them a name that honestly have some type of meaning behind it, versus just something that sounds good. Simple as that. But, man, that's all I really wanted to share. Like I said, love and light, positivity all around, all day, every day. Y'all stay blessed. Y'all already know who I am. The one and only P.O.U.R, aka Divinely One of a Kind.